Hey, thank you for joining our College App Kickoff. This is the 7th year, and I think Molly has been a part of it probably close to every year. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Mrs. Bencomo, College and Career Center Specialist at Prospect High School. Before I introduce you, I would like to encourage students to use that chat box for college-related questions. This is a great opportunity for you to hear from an expert. Also, if there are parents here, you're so very welcome. We're glad you're here too. Go ahead and hold those questions for either myself or for Molly at the end. We want our seniors to have priority. We want them to have agency in this process. So with that being said, I'd like to welcome my good friend, one of my favorite colleagues, Molly Ingram of the University of Arizona.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Amy. And the feeling is mutual. You were all in very good hands with Mrs. Bencomo, and I'm super excited to be the first presentation of your kickoff week. So like Mrs. Bencomo said, my name is Molly Ingram. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Assistant Director of National Recruitment for the University of Arizona. So a little bit about me. I am originally from Sacramento, California. I was born and raised there, and I currently live in Livermore, so I am your admissions representative. So if you are interested in applying to the University of Arizona, or if you have any Arizona related questions, I would be the person to contact. So I have the great benefit of managing regional recruiters throughout the nation who do work for the University of Arizona, but live outside of Arizona. And like myself, I am part of a regional organization called the Regional Admission Counselors of California, because there are actually hundreds of people like me out there who do work for universities outside of California, but they live in the state of California, and they are there specifically to help you with the application process. So today I'm going to talk to you about why you should consider putting some out-of-state schools on your college list, and we'll talk about kind of the pros and cons and all the various benefits of what is beneficial about going out of state. So there is my contact information, and of course I can put it into the chat at the end. If you do have questions, I encourage you to put them into the chat. Just know that I might not answer them right away, since I will be kind of focused on presenting, and then I'll check the chat at the end. But please put questions in the chat as they come up. And then there's a little description of what RAC is. So we do have members from more than 119 institutions. So that's over 119 universities for you to choose from outside of the state of California who have a person that is specifically dedicated to living within our amazing state and helping you with that process. Now, I also have some personal background and knowledge and experience of the out-of-state process. While I did go to UC Davis for my undergraduate degree, I did go out of state for grad school. So I have had both the in-state and out-of-state college experience. And I think there are definitely benefits to both. But today I'm going to focus on why you should consider out of state. Now, one of the main reasons why you should consider out-of-state universities is simply because of size. Now, if we look at the populations listed here, Massachusetts has almost 7 million people, and look how many colleges they have. My older sister, she is a PhD student at Boston College, and when I went to visit her, I feel like I walked past like maybe 8 colleges just in a very short span of Boston, the city. So in Massachusetts, there are quite a few colleges to accommodate that person to university ratio. Now we look at Florida. Florida is a much drastically bigger state in terms of population, and they have a little bit more universities to choose from. Now we look at California. California has almost double the people of Florida, but it does not have double the amount of universities to choose from. So basically what this means is if you live in California and you want to stay in California, you have far fewer options than people who might live in Massachusetts or Florida and wish to remain within their home state in order to go to a 4-year university. And because of that, it does make things competitive. Now, I don't say that to scare you. I don't say that to, be a Debbie Downer, mainly just that's the reality of the situation. If you look outside of California, you are going to increase your options exponentially. There are over 4,200 four-year colleges, 2 and 4-year colleges in the United States. And if you're feeling particularly adventurous and you're cool with going to school overseas, there are some excellent options in places like Australia and the UK, and quite a few of those international schools. They do have representatives who live in California who are also part of RAC. That's going to be over 17,000 universities to choose from. Whereas if you just say, nope, I'm staying in state, I'm only going to apply to universities in California, you're looking at 280 options. And that does include community colleges as well as four-year universities. Now, some reasons why you should consider expanding your options to those 17,000 choices. Major impaction, that's a huge issue in California. I cannot think of how many times I get emails from students in California who email me and say, hey, I'm interested in applying to Arizona. What are your impacted majors? Well, major impaction typically isn't an issue out of state. In state, it is quite common. Basically, what this means is there are more students who are in that major or program than they have space for in classes, which means that it might take you longer than 4 years to graduate, which means more money because you're going to be paying for tuition longer. So going out of state means that you're not going to have to compete necessarily for spots in those classes that you need to graduate on time, which is why we say it's a 4-year degree. It actually does equal 4 years, not this, oh no, I need that one more class to graduate and I'm going to have to stay until fall because my in-state institution, that's the only time I'm able to get into that class. Also, direct entry opportunities. There tend to be quite a few options throughout the country outside of California. What I mean by that is I'm referring to programs like nursing and business, where you might be applying to a program and it might be, oh, our, pre-nursing first 2 years, and then you have to apply for nursing, the professional program. There are universities throughout the country where you apply once, you get in, and boom, you're in the program. So that can be quite beneficial if you are looking to go out of state. And then, of course, higher acceptance rates. I think oftentimes when people think about college, they think it's, almost impossible to get in. It's like winning the lottery. It's very competitive. And that's true for a lot of schools in California. But actually, outside of the state of California, the acceptance rates are much, much higher. I did pull these numbers this morning. I updated it. And actually, the acceptance rates for places like Stanford, UCLA, and Berkeley, they have gone down. So it has gotten much more competitive to be admitted into Stanford, UCLA, and Berkeley than it has in the past 4 years. So Stanford's acceptance is at an all-time low of 3.68%. So you are competing with people all over the world that want to go to Stanford, and 3.68%, it's not that great of an acceptance rate. Now, if you look at the national average acceptance rate, it's 68%. So really what I want you to get out of this slide in particular is recognize that there are plenty of universities in the nation that want to admit you. They have the room for qualified applicants. They want you to come to their university. And it's not going to be this issue of, oh, you're valedictorian and you have cured cancer and you've done all of these amazing things, and yet, sorry, we still don't have room for you at Berkeley, UCLA, Stanford, and so forth. Oftentimes in California, these are the schools we typically think of. These are dream universities for a lot of students. It is a student's top choice in many situations, but expand your horizons and know that there is a university out there for you, probably more than you even realize. So quite a few schools, they do have a much higher acceptance rate than what we're typically used to seeing in California. For instance, gotta plug Arizona somehow because it is the institution in which I work for. We actually have assured admission. So I like to tell students it's admitted, not yet submitted. So if you are in the top 25% of your graduating class, Or if you have an unweighted GPA of a 3.0 and you've taken all of Arizona's core academic requirements, which essentially are the UC A through Gs, they're very similar. And if you have questions about that, you can always contact me at a later date. But essentially, if you meet that criteria, you're going to be admitted. You just have to turn in your application to us. So it's not going to be a surprise, but it's nevertheless exciting. And there are a lot of universities out there who have similar policies like Arizona, where if you meet the criteria to be admitted, you will be admitted. There are some caveats, of course. There are programs that are considered selective and they might have a higher GPA requirement. So for instance, at Arizona, it's possible to be automatically admitted to the university through assured admission, but you might not meet the criteria for our honors college or engineering or nursing, which typically they're looking for a higher GPA. But knowing that there are schools out there that do have a policy in place like this, hopefully that will put you at ease going into the application process your senior year, knowing that there are some really great choices across the country that want to admit you. Now, we get a lot of, statements about the kind of the misconceptions about going out of state. And I would say the biggest one, it always surrounds money. College is very expensive. This is true anywhere. And we know that that's something where it is going to be a huge financial investment. You want to feel confident in your investment because this is something you're going to be paying for 4 years or quite some time if you are taking out loans. And so oftentimes people think it's cheaper to stay in-state than it is to go to college out of state, specifically for the reason that public universities charge in-state versus out-of-state tuition, because tuition is being funded essentially through taxpayer dollars. Now, if you go to a private school, it's going to be the same price regardless, because it doesn't have anything to do with taxpayer dollars. So if you go to a private school in Oregon, you're going to be paying the same price as someone who's from Oregon. But public schools specifically, they do charge in-state versus out-of-state tuition. And there are a few reasons why it can be cheaper or comparable to go out of state compared to California prices. One is the Western Undergraduate Exchange. Now, some of you might be familiar with this. For those who aren't, basically, this is a program where rather than paying the full out-of-state tuition cost, you'd be paying 150% of the in-state tuition cost. So it's going to be cheaper than the full out-of-state cost, a little bit more than resident tuition. Now, keep in mind that just because a university is in the Western region, like Oregon, for instance, that's a Western region state. Not every university participates in WUI. So the University of Oregon, for instance, they don't participate in WUI. So unfortunately, that's not something that you are able to obtain. So if you are looking at the Western Undergraduate Exchange, and I can put the website in there into the chat, or even if you just Google it, you should be able to find a list of all of the states that participate in it, as well as all of the universities. But even on a more granular level, there are policies in place and terms and conditions for every university. Some universities for WUI, they require a GPA minimum. Others, it might be a major restriction. So if you are applying to schools, don't just assume, oh, this is a public university in Arizona, I'm going to get the WUI price. This is in Nevada, I'm going to get WUI. Look into those terms and conditions. And if you're unsure where to look or how to find that, people like me, your admission counselor for that university, they can help answer those questions. So to give you an example, Arizona, for instance, we are a WUI state. We do offer WUI, but we only offer WUI for 2 majors, mining and geological engineering and natural resources. So if a student is pursuing one of those majors, they're going to qualify for WUI. If they're pursuing any other major, they will not qualify for WUI. However, there are lots of other scholarship opportunities, some that might be specifically just for California students. So at Arizona, for instance, we do have a merit scholarship for students where actually, depending on their GPA, this scholarship could be a better deal than what WUI would be for them. And that is not major restricted. You can major in anything at Arizona. And if you meet the criteria for that merit scholarship, that is something that's going to come with your acceptance letter. Now, some other universities, we might have scholarships that are specifically related to geographical region, maybe offered by an alumni chapter. For instance, the Baycats Alumni Association for the University of Arizona, they have a scholarship specifically for Northern California students. So there are scholarships out there. You just have to be a little proactive about looking into them. Some of them might require separate applications. Others, you might be automatically applying for it when you apply to that college. So Arizona, for instance, our merit scholarship for non-resident students, you were automatically considered for that when you apply to the university. So it's not going to take any extra steps on your part, which makes it nice and convenient. Now, other things to keep in mind, depending on your family's financial situation, you might qualify for need-based scholarships and grants, many of which can be stacked and used in conjunction with any merit-based scholarships that you might apply for. And I would say the main difference, merit-based scholarship, especially like the Arizona Tuition Award as an example, your family could be making $0 a year, or they could be making $1 million a year. If you qualify for this scholarship, you are going to get it because it is based on your GPA. It has absolutely nothing to do with your family's financial circumstances. But need-based scholarships, they are going to look at your financial circumstances, and that's going to be helpful if you do qualify for need-based grants that you can use as well. And then finally, the cost of living. I think that is a huge one that a lot of people, especially if you've never left the state of California, they don't realize. I think it's very easy for us to think, this is just the way it is. It's totally normal to pay $6 for gas, or it's totally normal that this burger is $20. But if you go outside of California, you're going to be shocked and amazed, hopefully, by the cost of living in some of these other states. I was in Tucson for work a couple weeks ago. Gas was like $3.20. It was very low. Food is cheaper, rent is cheaper. So if you're leaving California, particularly the Bay Area, you're going to be pleasantly surprised that a lot of these universities, they are going to be in affordable areas. And I think that's something that people don't often take into consideration. They're just looking at that sticker price of a university, and that can intimidate people and scare them away. But in actuality, you should look at the whole picture. Think about, how much is it going to cost me to live here? Is it going to be easy to find a place to live? Am I going to be sharing a closet with 5 other people and paying $2,000? In California, maybe, but out of state, that's highly unlikely. Now, this is the Arizona Tuition Award Merit Scholarship that I was talking about earlier. So just to give you an example, if you're applying to Arizona and you have an unweighted GPA of a 2.75 or higher in your core coursework from your freshman, sophomore, and junior years, you will automatically receive some merit scholarship. Obviously, the higher your GPA is, the higher that's going to be. And this is renewable for 4 years. So if you had a 4.0 unweighted, you would be getting $32,000 off of tuition every single year. So there are a lot of universities out there where they have scholarships like this. They want to reward you for the hard work that you've been doing in high school, the grades that you've been receiving, and that's going to go a long way when you are looking for those affordable options. And speaking of affordable options, let's look at a breakdown. So this I recently updated. Everything has gone up in cost. What hasn't in the country? So it used to be cheaper a year ago, 2 years ago, but this is what the current averages are. And of course, you can always check my references. I do have everything cited. Or if you just Google, you can see the average estimated cost of attendance on university websites. So the California State University, it's a little trickier because it really depends on what CSU you're choosing. Obviously, it's going to be more expensive to live in Fullerton or Long Beach than it is in Bakersfield, but that is the average of what it would be. And the UC average, it's a little over $42,000 per year. Now, keep in mind, this is the cost of attendance. So this is an average for things that not only include tuition, but it also includes room and board and miscellaneous expenses. Now, you will notice that out of state, it's about $2,000 more than the UCs. So it is about in line with what it would cost to stay in state. And again, really keep in mind, this is not including scholarships. This is just sticker price average. So for instance, University of Arizona, it's about $40,000, not including the room and board. If a student's getting $32,000 off of tuition, that's about $8,000 that they'd have to cover for tuition. So it makes Arizona a pretty affordable choice. And then again, private college / university, they don't charge in-state versus out-of-state tuition. So you would be paying the same price regardless of where you're coming from. Now, aside from money, I think money is a huge deal. It's important. Obviously, we want to go somewhere where it's going to be a good financial fit for us, but you also want to consider the kind of social fit, the academic fit, and the geographical fit. And some reasons why students like to go out of state is because you're going to experience growth and confidence and independence. Maybe you have never been away from home before, and this is an opportunity for you to kind of explore a different part of the country, not only get to know that part of the country, but get to know yourself. I always like to use the example when I went to Oregon for grad school. I had never gone hiking before. I am not an outdoorsy person. Yes, that might shock some of you because we have amazing trails in California, I know, but I never had. And that was something that was very common with my Oregon, classmates, people in my cohort. So I went hiking. I became a hiking person. And I did things in Oregon that I wouldn't necessarily have done if I was still living in California, staying in my comfort zone. So it is a really great way to kind of branch out, try new things, get to know more about the culture of a different part of the country, and learn more about yourself. I learned I'm not really a hiker, but if I'm in Oregon and someone wants me to go hiking with them, I will. So it was a great way to make new friends. I still keep in touch with my friends from grad school, even though we all live in different parts of the country. One of my best friends, he's in New York now. The other one chose to stay in Oregon. I went back to California, but I still have those friends. And so it is a really nice connection, and it does make for a, rich, diverse college experience. And if you have friends throughout the country, you're always going to have fun places to visit, and people to stay with when you do go to visit those places. And I would also say in terms of going out of state, sometimes students say, it's so far away from home. So maybe your comfort level is looking on the West Coast, looking at universities that are not in your backyard, but aren't too far away. Some universities, maybe it's just a quick non-direct flight away from home. So definitely, look at those flight patterns and see what is comfortable to you and accessible. There are quite a few wonderful universities throughout the country. Typically every school, they're going to have an airport nearby, so it's not going to be too hard for you to get home. Other things to keep in mind in terms of, the places that you're going, I think culture shock can sometimes be a thing for students. So really think about the culture of where you're going. Is that something that's going to be a good fit for you or not? Some people jokingly and fondly refer to the University of Arizona as UC Tucson, just because about 1 in 4 of our students, they are from California. And the fact that Arizona is a bordering state, there is a lot of comfort and familiarity in terms of the culture in Tucson, but at the same time, Tucson offers a lot of really great things that you don't see in California. Like there are the giant saguaro cacti. They are the nation's largest cacti, and they can really only survive and thrive in the Sonoran Desert. So that's something that I always love whenever I go to Arizona. I know I'm in Arizona when I see these beautiful cacti that have lived for over 150 years. Or it's the food. Tucson is a UNESCO city of gastronomy known specifically for Mexican food. So when I go back to Tucson, I am for sure going to all my favorite Mexican restaurants, one of which is where the chimichanga was invented, and it is the oldest Mexican restaurant in continuous operation in the nation. So all of these places, all of these different universities outside of California, they're going to be able to provide you with a unique experience that you wouldn't get if you went to college in your own backyard. Now, that's not to say that it's for everyone, but I hope that you will consider it. And I hope that you will really ask yourself, what are you looking for in your ideal college experience? So throughout your college kickoff week, think about that. Think about what are you looking for in college? What do you want to be doing when you're not in class and when you're not studying? Building that good college list is more than just picking schools based on brand name recognition. It's more than just seeing if it has your major of interest. It's about what you plan to be doing when you are making this place your home away from home. So I hope you'll keep that in mind. And my last kind of word of advice before I get to the chat, because I see some stuff in the chat, is also I really, really hope that if you take one thing away from this, you will recognize and remember that there is a college out there for you. Many universities in the nation, they want to admit you. So if you are not admitted to Stanford or Berkeley or UCLA, remember that that has absolutely nothing to do with you as a person and your worth. It could be just that they had so many applicants that it was a really tough year to make those decisions. But there are many, many colleges out there that are going to be a great fit for you, and they do want to admit you. So know that when you go into the application process, there's going to be schools out there for you. And then, of course, I said, I cite my sources. So those are my sources. A lot of this you can find if you Google, and I hope that this was informative. So now I'm going to look into the chat because I see I have some comments it's just Amy. Does anyone have any questions? And yes, we are visiting prospects. So if you'd like to see me in person, as well as my colleagues, we would be more than happy to chat. So, and thank you for putting the WUI link in the chat. I appreciate that.
Yeah, my pleasure. So there was a direct question to me about merit-based scholarships, and which do they look at your total GPA or particular grades? Because the UCs and CSUs only consider sophomore and junior year.
Mm-hmm.
Those out-of-state schools for merit scholarship, is it cumulative?
That's a good question. And common answer, it depends. So a lot of universities, you're going to want to check with them specifically. If you can't find it on the scholarships and financial aid website for that university, just ask your admissions counselor. But for Arizona specifically, we do look at freshman year grades. So we're going to be looking at freshman year, sophomore year, and junior year only. So if you do really well senior year, that's great, but it's not going to change your merit scholarship. Also keep in mind that a lot of universities, they are going to recalculate your GPA. So if you took a bunch of art classes or private schools, sometimes religion classes, they're not factored into the GPA at Arizona. So every university is going to look at it a little bit differently, and definitely ask if you're unsure, because that is, a transparent process. We're very transparent about exactly what classes we're looking at and how that's going to factor into your GPA. But again, I can't speak for every university, but Arizona, we look at unweighted freshman, sophomore, junior year grades for merit. Now, many students say, well, why aren't you looking at my weighted GPA? I took those EP classes. I worked really hard. This isn't fair. Now, we do look at weighted GPA for admission purposes. It's particularly valuable if you are applying to our honors college, because they are looking at rigor. But the reason we don't use weighted GPA for scholarships is for equity. Now, you might be very lucky to go to a high school that has AP opportunities, but not every high school in the country offers APs, or they don't offer as many. And so we don't want to disadvantage one student by saying, oh, well, your school only offers 3 APs. Sorry, you're getting a lower scholarship than the student who had 12 APs and their parents hired a private tutor and all of these different things. So it's one way that we kind of look at equity. So I guess that was a long-winded answer, but it depends.
But that actually is important to let all of us know how that's discerned. Mm-hmm. and the why behind it. There's another question. Okay, so prospect was online. Mm-hmm. for this class freshman year. Is there anything that they should note in their application, or is that considered? How is that considered at the universities?
Again, it depends. For Arizona, we recognize, I mean, and especially with California, we get thousands of applicants from California specifically, more so than we do from any other states. So I'm well aware of it just because I know, like, I didn't get to come and see Mrs. Bencomo during COVID, and like we were apart and we're living in the same area as you. And so most offices, they are cognizant of that. They're aware of that. There's not going to be like like we're gonna, count your grades differently because it was online. I think the main concern a lot of students have is their grades might have suffered because it was challenging being in an online format. If that's the case, there's no way for us to calculate that differently. So unfortunately, it's not going to change that. But if it's an admissions purpose concern, like if a student's concerned they're not going to be admitted because their grades might have declined due to circumstances, they can certainly address that in the personal statement section of the application, for Arizona specifically. For other universities, I would imagine it's probably going to be a similar scenario, but everyone's aware that COVID happened across the country, the world. We all were living it. And yes, there are regional differences, of course. And yes, not every school was 100% online, but that's something that a university's admissions office should be aware of, because every admissions office has people assigned to specific territories. So typically when your application is being reviewed, it is being reviewed by someone who is responsible for that specific part of the country. I see. So I got a direct question about what do I recommend as far as applying to schools internationally? That's a good question. So I definitely don't have as much experience about international universities as some of my colleagues in RAC do. If you go to the RAC website, which is regionaladmissions.com, we do have a listing of all of our members, and you can see which international schools have representatives living in California. That's convenient because they are on your time zone, so they'll be able to answer questions on Pacific time. You don't have to wake up at a random hour in the morning to get someone in a different country. I would say it really depends on what you're looking for. Some international schools, they're going to have really great academic programs that maybe you can't find in the United States. Maybe it's you just really, really love a particular country and you want to live there. So I would ask yourself, think about what it is about international universities that appeals to you. And again, ask your admissions counselor. They are experts in helping you kind of navigate the situation of being an international student. There's, all sorts of things about student visas that I am not qualified to answer, but I know that many of my international university representative colleagues would be able to talk to you about. I see another direct question about, let's see, it says, should you apply first, then have a visit to the college after when accepted to understand the environment leading to commitment? That is a great question. I would say it's up to you. Some people, they choose to go visit every gosh darn university in the country that they're interested in applying to. If you have the financial means to do that, great, but not everyone does. I would be so inclined personally, my personal opinion is I would visit afterwards. I personally, if I visited a school beforehand and I fell in love with it and then I got rejected, that would be really sad. Whereas if I waited until after I was admitted and then I went and visited, not only would I be saving money in terms of visiting, but then, I won't have that heartbreak of, oh my gosh, I love this campus and I can't attend here in the fall. I will say a lot of universities, they have amazing virtual options. So you can virtually tour a lot of schools. So that's going to be convenient for you in terms of time and money and logistics. But really it depends. I do know some students, they'll visit before they apply, they'll get in, they'll visit after they apply. Some universities, most universities, they will have like an accepted students day. So Arizona, every spring we have admitted student day. It's super fun. It's an all-day celebration specifically for students who have been admitted. So I typically tell students, if you can only afford to visit campus once, that would be the day that I would go, just because every department has, like an open house going on. You can meet with people from housing and financial aid, and Wilbur, our mascot, he's out roaming around. So a lot of universities, they do have kind of like acceptance days, but pretty much every university in the country, they're going to have in-person tours, regardless of your acceptance status that you can take. So it's up to you. It's up to you and whatever is going to be a good fit for your family.
Yeah, Molly, can I add to that?
Mhm.
I attended an acceptance day for my daughter, and it was an out-of-state school. It was a private school. The minute we walked off campus, she got immediate notification that she was awarded an additional scholarship
Oh,
for visiting the campus, which meant that that scholarship made the cost of attendance the same as a CSU.
oh, wow. That's amazing.
So if you want to be strategic about scholarships and when to visit, actually that admit day is perfect, and those virtual tours, you get a lot, and follow on social media too.
Yeah, that's a good point. I will add to Mrs. Bencomo's point, most public universities, you're not going to see that.
No, it's a private.
Yeah, so private, perhaps. Another thing I do want to add is sometimes students are worried, if I don't visit campus, is this going to hurt my chances of being admitted? Absolutely not. Universities know that, not everyone has the same financial means to visit, so that's never going to be something that's held against you. Some private universities, they might track demonstrated interest. Basically, they will keep track of whether you visited campus or not, and they could look at that, but typically it's not going to hurt you if you don't come to campus before applying. And there are plenty of other ways that you can demonstrate interest. Going to a high school visit, whether it's virtual or that college representative has someone come to your high school. It could be emailing your admissions counselor with questions. It could be attending a virtual session on their website. So there's a lot of ways that you can show a university that you're interested that aren't going to cost you money in the form of going physically to see that campus. Let's see, other questions. I have another direct question, or this one. So are A through G requirements in California high school graduation requirements usually compatible with out-of-state college requirements? I would say yes. For Arizona, absolutely. I would say the main difference is we typically are looking for, well, not typically, we are. We're looking for 4 years of math, and correct me if I'm wrong, Amy, but the math for UCs, it's still 3, right? It's 3 years.
I know at Prospect and all the schools in our district, we always recommend 4.
Okay, great.
We recommend it, but it's not required either through the UCs or for our graduation, but it's just recommended.
Okay, yeah. So I would say usually if you're graduating from high school in California, especially schools like Prospect, you are going to have those requirements that are compatible. Now, sometimes students, they panic when they see that Arizona requires 4 years of math, and maybe they only took 3 because 3 was required and 4 was just recommended. That doesn't mean you're not going to be admitted to Arizona. We do allow students to have 1 or 2 deficiencies, as we call them. Basically, a deficiency means you're missing one of the requirements. So that's okay. We would just look at your application holistically, and we would look at all factors. So I would say as long as you're doing what you need to do to graduate from high school, you should be fine with out-of-states, particularly the public out-of-state schools. They're similar in terms of the requirements that they're looking for. Let's see, question about size, campus size. Does size matter? You tell me, Ryan, does it matter to you? Some people, they want a big school experience. They want to be on a campus that has, tens of thousands of students. They don't want to run into the same people every single day. Whereas other students, they might want a smaller experience. So ask yourself that, what am I going to feel comfortable with? Walking around universities in terms of size, that can be a very helpful experience experience, and it doesn't necessarily have to be the ones that you're applying to. Getting on any college campus, go walk around at Berkeley, go walk around at UC Davis, go walk around at Santa Clara University and get a feel for it. It's going to give you an idea of what kind of size of campus you might like. Now, if the idea of, having to be accountable and you're going to have a professor that's going to notice if you're not in class and they're taking roll, if that's going to bother you, then maybe a large university is going to be a better fit for you. But if you want that, smaller connection, then definitely look at schools that have a smaller student body size. And the same can be said for campus size. If you're looking for that smaller experience, I feel like you'll know if it's right for you or not. Another direct question about applying. So does applying at the start of application season give me a better chance of getting accepted into college rather than applying later? I imagine there might be another presentation throughout the college week that will go into further detail about this perhaps, but just briefly, I can talk about kind of some of the different application methods. So Arizona, we're a rolling admissions school. A lot of large public out-of-state universities, they utilize rolling admissions, which basically means you will get an admissions decision back dependent upon when you turn your application into us. So our application at Arizona, it has been open since July 1st, and it will remain open until May 1st of your senior year. Now, I would say I would recommend applying sooner rather than later, just for scholarship reasons and for housing reasons, because not every university guarantees housing. And Arizona specifically, you cannot apply for housing until you've been admitted to the university. So if you were to apply to Arizona today, you would hear back from us in 2 to 4 weeks. Now, that does not mean that you are committing to coming to Arizona. You're not signing your life away to be a wildcat. It just means that you're going to have a college acceptance, assuming it's an acceptance, let's hope it is, in your back pocket. And then if you want to wait until you've heard back from other schools, that's totally fine. Other universities, they might have hard application deadlines, like our application opens on this day, it closes on this day. If you don't get your application in by that date, too bad, maybe next year. And then typically schools that are not rolling admission, they are going to release all of their decisions at the same time. So the UCs, for instance, they're going to have a set deadline, and everyone that is, applying to Berkeley, they're going to hear back from Berkeley on the same day. Arizona is different in that sense, as are other rolling admission schools. And then the only other things in terms of giving you a better chance of being accepted would be schools that offer early decision or early action. I won't get into like a ton of specifics on that, but basically one of those, early action, you're basically saying, if I get in here, I'm committing to coming here. Early decision, that is one of your top interests. And so that can be beneficial, but you really should know, like, yes, for sure, like I'm committing to coming here if I'm admitted. So rolling admission, I would say we are the most flexible in terms of our application process. Come join us if you want to. You don't have to tell us right away. We're pretty flexible.
And just to add to that, if you would like to start your application season with a yes, look at the school profile and look for a school with rolling admission, because they let you know sooner. And I remember both of my children, they applied early to a rolling admission school. They ended up not going to those, but they were able to hold on to that yes in their back pocket and feel better about like the entire experience, because they're like, well, no matter what, I'm going to school somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. And if Arizona is your back pocket option, we're going to be releasing our first round of decisions in 5 days. So if any of you listening, if you've already applied, our first round of decisions goes out on August 14th. And then from there, it's going to be 2 to 4 weeks. So 2 to 4 week turnaround. Sometimes it can be faster. So that's one of the benefits of applying to rolling admission schools. Like Mrs. Bencomo said, it's really nice to have that peace of mind knowing like, well, I got in somewhere, I have an option. So that's always nice. Let's see, other question about merit-based scholarships. Are they only based on GPA or are they also based on SAT score? That is a good question. Depends on the school. Again, Arizona specifically, it is only based on GPA. Prior to COVID, we did have SAT scores as a factor, but because of COVID and because we knew that not everyone was being able to access the SAT or ACT, we eliminated that requirement. A lot of schools eliminated SAT and ACT requirements in light of COVID and have maintained that. So it depends on the school. I would check, but typically a lot of them, they have eliminated it. In fact, our honors college, they are test blind, meaning that they will not look at your test scores, even if you do have them. And also for students, if you hear that a school is test optional, it really does mean it's optional. It is not going to hurt you if you don't take that test. I always tell students, save your money. Don't bother wasting money sending us your test score if you don't need to. If you know that you're going to get into Arizona based on our assured admission criteria, the SAT is going to do absolutely nothing for you. It's not going to get you more money. You've already been admitted through assured admission. And there are many schools out there that have similar policies. Let's see, is it usually cheaper to find on-campus housing when looking out of state? I think it depends. Depends on the state, depends on the university. Typically, on-campus housing is going to be more expensive than off-campus housing because it's owned by the university. You know, you have that prime real estate because you're living on campus. You could literally roll out of bed, and it's very hard to be late to class when your dorm is right across the street from your lecture hall. So I would say typically, especially with Arizona, it's more expensive to live on campus than it is to live off campus, but it's a good way to get established at a university. Retention rates are much higher for students who live on campus that first year. It's a really great way to meet people, maybe make friends that you might want to move off campus with the following year. Arizona specifically, we don't require students to live on campus that first year, but typically freshmen, they will live in the dorms the first year, make friends, and then move off campus, whether it's into an apartment or a house with friends or into a fraternity or sorority chapter house. So it depends, but yes. But I would say generally speaking, out of state tends to be cheaper. Last I checked, UC Berkeley's dorms, much more expensive than Arizona's dorms. So let's see, are admissions tied to aid? Are admissions tied to aid, or is it school specific? I think if I'm understanding the question correctly, you're asking about if your money is dependent upon the school in which you're admitted, maybe. If the direct message, if you want to clarify, that would be fine. I could kind of guess, I could say financial aid, if you are filling out the FAFSA, that you do send it to the universities in which you're applying to, and every university is going to give you their own kind of financial aid package. You might qualify for things that are from the government, but every university handles financial aid differently. So definitely submit your FAFSA to the universities in which you're applying. I always recommend students fill it out, even if they say like, oh yes, like we look good on paper, but we can't actually afford it. Still fill it out. You never know. It's free to fill out, so you're not going to be, spending money filling out the free application for federal student aid. But I think I'm not entirely sure if I understand the question. So if you want to put another one into the chat, let me know.
I am actually going to ask the student to either email me directly or maybe email you directly, but we have to wrap it up because we have another session starting at 2:00, and I want everyone to have a moment to either catch their breath, freshen up, grab some water if they need to, but please, everyone, say thank you. This was such a tremendous amount of information, valuable information, and I really appreciate it. So thank you, Molly, for being.
Of course. Yes, and I put my email and my phone number into the chat. Of course, if you can't find it, you lose it. Ask Mrs. Bencomo. She knows how to get a hold of me, and I hope you all have a wonderful rest of the week. Best of luck with the school year, and perhaps I will see you at your high school in this fall. So thank you so much.